Okay, Hare Krishna. Om Gana Timirandasya Yananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschachade Jatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Great, Hare Krishna. And welcome everyone. We're reading chapter 15, which is titled, It Will Not Be Possible to Assist You. So whoever wants to read, some people didn't get a chance to read or weren't here last week, or if anyone else wants to read, please, yeah, and we'll just, do the usual thing and we can take it in turns.
I can read, Prabhuji, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be like liquid nectar being poured in our ears. Thank you.
Right. Chapter 15. How can I move this up there? Sorry. I have come here in this old age, neither for sightseeing nor for any personal interest. It is for the interest of the entire humanity that I am trying to implement the science of Krishna, which will actually make them happy. So it's the duty of every devotee of Lord Krishna to help me by all means. From a letter to Sumati Muraji. November passed and December came, and Prabhupada, having obtained an extension on his visa, stayed on. America seemed so opulent, yet many things were difficult to tolerate. The sirens and bells from fire engines and police cars seemed like they would crack his heart. Sometimes at night he would hear a person being attacked and crying for help. From his first days in the city, he had noted that the smell of dog stool was everywhere, and although it was such a rich city, he could rarely find a mango to purchase, and if he did, it was very expensive and usually had no taste. From his room he would sometimes hear the horns of ocean liners, and he would dream that some day he would sail around the world with a Sankirtan party, preaching in all the major cities of the world. The weather went below freezing, colder than he had ever experienced in India. Daily he had to walk toward the Hudson against a west wind that even on an ordinary winter's day would take your breath away and make your eyes water and your face grow numb. On a stormy day, the driving wind and sudden gusts could even knock a man down. Sometimes a cold rain would turn the streets slick with ice. The cold would become especially severe as one approached the shelterless, windswept area of West Side Drive, where occasional whirlwinds carried down leaves and paper trash mysteriously high into the air. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada wore a coat Dr. Mishra had given him, but he never gave up wearing his dhoti, despite the cold, windy walks. Swami Nikhilananda of the Rama Krishna mission had advised against Prabhupada that if he wanted to stay in the West, he should abandon his traditional Indian dress and strict vegetarianism. Meat eating and liquor, as well as pants and coat, were almost a necessity in this climate, he had said. Before Prabhupada had left India, one of his godbrothers had demonstrated to him how he could eat in the West with a knife and fork. But Prabhupada never considered taking on Western ways. His advisors cautioned him not to remain an alien, but to get into the spirit of American life, even if it meant breaking vows he had held in India. Almost all Indian immigrants compromised their old ways. But Prabhupada's idea was different, and he could not be budged. The others may have had to compromise, he thought, but they had come to beg technological knowledge from the West. I have not come to beg something, he said, but to give something. In his solitary wanderings, Prabhupada made acquaintances with a number of local people. There was Mr. Rubin, a Turkish Jew who worked as a New York City subway conductor. Mr. Rubin met Prabhupada on a park bench, and being a sociable fellow and a world traveler, sat and talked with the Indian holy man, Mr. Rubin. He seemed to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. He would look out and say, I'm not a poor man, I am rich. There are temples and books, they're existing, they're there, but the time is separating us from them. He always mentioned we and spoke about the one who sent him, his spiritual master. He didn't know people at that time, but he said, I'm never alone. He always looked like a lonely man to me. That's what made me think of him like a holy man, Elijah, who always went out alone. I don't believe he had any followers. When the weather was not rainy or icy, Prabhupada would catch the bus to Grand Central Station and visit the Central Library on 42nd Street. His Srimad Bhagavatams were there, some of the same volumes he had sold to the US Embassy in New Delhi, and he took pleasure in seeing them listed in the card catalogue and learning that they were being regularly checked out and read. He would sometimes walk through UN Plaza or walk up to New India House on 64th Street, where he had met Mr. Malhotra, a consulate officer. It was through Mr. Malhotra that he had contacted the Tagore Society and had secured an invitation to lecture before one of their meetings back in November.
Riding the bus down Fifth Avenue, he would look out at the buildings and imagine that someday they could be used in Krishna consciousness. He would take a special interest in certain buildings. One on 23rd Street and one with a dome on 14th Street attracted his attention. He would think of how the materialists had constructed such elaborate buildings and had yet made no provisions for spiritual life. Despite all the great achievements of technology, the people felt empty and useless. They had built these great buildings, but the children were going to LSD. December 2nd. New York Times headlines. New York City hospitals report marked rise in LSD cases admitted for care. Protest against US participation in Vietnam War mounts. The weather grew cold, but there was no snow in December. On Columbus Avenue, shops were selling Christmas trees, and the Continental restaurants were bright with holiday lighting. On 72nd, the Retailers Association erected tall red poles topped with green tinsel Christmas trees. The tops of the trees on both sides of the street sprouted tinsel garlands that spanned the street and joined in red tinsel stars surrounded by coloured lights. Although Srila Prabhupada did no Christmas shopping, he visited many bookstores. Orientalia, Sam Weiser's Doubleday, The Paragon, and others, trying to sell his Srimad Bhagavatams. Mrs. Ferber, the wife of the Paragon Book Gallery proprietor, considered Prabhupada a pleasant and extremely polite small gentleman. The first time he called, she wasn't interested in his books, but he tried again, and she took several volumes. Prabhupada used to stop by about once a week and since his books were selling regularly, he would collect. Sometimes when he needed copies to sell personally, he would come by and pick them up from Mrs. Ferber, and sometimes he would phone to ask her how his books were selling. Mrs. Ferber, every time he came, he would ask for a glass of water. If a customer would make such a request, I would ordinarily say, "There is the water cooler." But because he was an old man, I couldn't tell him that, of course. He was very polite always, very modest, and a great scholar. So whenever he would ask, I would fetch him a cup of water personally. Once Prabhupada was talking with Mrs. Ferber about Indian cuisine, and she mentioned that she especially liked samosas. The next time he paid her a visit, he brought a tray of samosas, which she enjoyed. Would somebody else like to read?
Tiana will read, if that's okay.
Harvey Cohen came to room 501 to visit the Swami who had so impressed him at Ananda Ashram. The room he occupied was a tiny office in the back of the Yoga Society in uptown Manhattan. I began to go there regularly, and we sat facing each other on the floor in his little office with his typewriter and a new tape recorder on top of two suitcases. And there was a box of books he had brought from India and a color reproduction of dancing figures which he looked at often. I told Swami Bhaktivedanta that I was an artist, and he asked me to please paint the picture of the dancers, which he explained was of Lord Chaitanya and his disciples. The painting was called Sankirtana. Whenever I came to visit him, Swami would always be happy to see me. I told him about myself, and we chanted Hare Krishna together in his room many nights that winter. I would get the train uptown from my apartment to go and see him. January 11th, 1966. Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died of a heart attack while visiting Russia. The Prime Minister had been a personal acquaintance of Srila Prabhupada in India and an admirer of his Srimad Bhagavatam translation. He had been scheduled to visit America, and Prabhupada had expected to obtain a personal sanction from him for the release of funds from India. His untimely death was a great upset in Srila Prabhupada's plans to purchase the building at 143 West 72nd Street. The realtors had showed him the building, and he had already mentally designed the interior for deity worship and distribution of prasadam. The money was to come from India, and Prime Minister Shastri was to give personal sanction for release of the funds, but suddenly that was all changed.
January 14th. Prabhupada decided to write to the owner of the building, Mr. A.M. Hartman. He explained how his plans had been upset, and he posed a new plan. Now the Prime Minister, Mr. Lal Bahadur Shastri, is suddenly dead, and I am greatly perplexed, as there is now great difficulty for getting money from India. I am requesting you to allow me to use the place for the International Institution for God Consciousness, at least for some time. The house is lying vacant for so many days without any use, and I learn it that you are paying the taxes, insurance, and the other charges for the house, although you have no income from there. If you, however, allow this place for this public institution, you shall at least save the taxes and other charges which you are now paying for nothing. If I can start the institution immediately, certainly I shall be able to get sympathy locally, and in that case I may not be required to get money from India. I'm also requesting that Your Honour become one of the directors of this public institution, because you will give a place to start the institution. A.M. Hartman wasn't interested.
On the same day, he wrote, Mr. Hartman, Prabhupada received a letter from Sir Padam Bhat Singhania, the director of the very large JK organization in India. Prabhupada had written Sir Padam Bhatji for financial support, and his reply gave him hope. Not only was the Singhania family fabulously wealthy, but its members were devotees of Lord Krishna.
Dear Swamiji, I have gone through your letter. I am very glad to note that your idea of erecting a Sri Radhakrishna temple in New York. I think the proposal is a very good one, but the following are the difficulties. One, we have got to send foreign exchange for building the temple, for which the government sanction is required. Without government sanction, no money can be sent abroad. If the government of India agrees, then one can think of erecting the temple in New York. I doubt whether this small amount of 7 lakhs a temple can be built in New York. I mean to carry out a nice construction with Indian type architecture to get a temple completed in Indian type of architecture. We have to send a man from India. These are the two difficulties. Otherwise, your idea is very good. Srila Prabhupada and Mr. Singhania had a basic disagreement. A magnificent Indian temple in New York would cost many millions of dollars to construct. Prabhupada knew, of course, that if Padampat Singhania wanted, he could provide millions of dollars. But then how would they get so much money out of India? Prabhupada therefore again suggested that they spend only 7 lakhs. After purchasing the house, he wrote, we can build another story upon it with a temple dome, tractor, etc. Prabhupada had his own line of reasoning. Lord Dwarkadish exhibited his opulence in Dwarka with 16,000 queens, and it is understood that he built a palace for each and every queen. And the palaces were made of jewels and stones, and that there was no necessity for artificial light in these palaces. So your conception of building a temple of Lord Krishna is an opulence. But we are residents of Vrindavan, and Vrindavan has no palaces like your Dwarka. Vrindavan is full of forests and cows and the bank of the Yamuna. Lord Krishna, in his childhood, played the part of a cowherd boy without any royal opulence, as you people, the inhabitants of Dwarka, are accustomed. So when Dwarka Wallis meet the Vrindavan Wallis, they may be via media. With Sri Padampat Dwarka like wealth and Srila Prabhupada's Vrindavan like devotion, Lord Krishna, the Lord of Vrindavan and Dwarka, could be properly worshipped.
January 21st. He received Bon Maharaj's reply 3 weeks before Prabhupada had written to his godbrother, the director of the Institute of Oriental Philosophy in Vrindavan, that he had found a place for a temple in New York and that he wanted to install deities of Radha and Krishna. In his reply, Bon Maharaj quoted price estimates for 14-inch brass deities of Radha and Krishna, but he also warned that to begin deity worship would be a heavy responsibility. Srila Prabhupada responded, I think that after the temple has started, some men, even from America, may be available. As I see, they have at the Rama Krishna mission, as well as in so many yoga societies. So I am trying to open a temple here because Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, wanted it. Prabhupada also requested Bon Maharaj's assistance in getting the government to sanction release of the money he felt Padampat Singhania would donate. He mentioned that he had carried on an extensive personal correspondence with the Vice President of India, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was also known to Bon Maharaj. Tell him that it is not an ordinary temple of worship, but an international institution of God consciousness, based on the Srimad Bhagavatam. January 22nd, while Srila Prabhupada prayed to receive Radha Krishna in New York, a snowstorm hit the city. That morning, Srila Prabhupada, who had perhaps never before seen snow, woke and thought that someone had whitewashed the side of the building next door. Not until he went outside did he discover that it was snow. The temperature was 10 degrees.
The city went into a state of emergency, but Prabhupada continued his daily walks. Now he had to walk through heavy snow, only a thin dhoti beneath his overcoat, his head covered with his Swami hat. The main roads were cleared, but many sidewalks were covered with snow. Along the strip of park dividing Broadway, the gusting winds passed snowbanks to shoulder height and buried the benches. The Broadway kiosks, plastered with layers of posters and notices, were now plastered with additional layers of snow and ice. But despite the weather, New Yorkers still walked their dogs, the pets now wearing raincoats and mackinaws. Such pampering by American dog owners left Prabhupada with a feeling of surprised amusement. As he approached West End Avenue, he found the doormen blowing whistles to signal taxis as usual, but also scattering salt to melt the ice and create safe sidewalks in front of the buildings. In Riverside Park, the benches, pathways, and trees were glazed with ice and gave off a shimmering reflection from the sky. In the news, selective service officials announced the first substantial increase in the draft since the Korean War. A month-long peace ended with the US Air Force bombing North Vietnam. The New York transit strike ended after 3 weeks, and the transit labor leader died in jail of a heart attack. January the 30th, the East Coast was hit by severe blizzards. 7 inches of snow fell on the city, with winds of up to 50 miles an hour. The city of New York offered warm rooms and meals for people living in tenements without heat. Can you move it up as the camera's covering on my screen? Thank you. JFK Airport was closed, as were train lines and roadways into the city. For the second time within 8 days, a state of emergency was declared because of snow. As a lone individual, Srila Prabhupada could not do anything about the snow emergency or the international warfare. He saw these as mere symptoms of the age of Kali. Always there would be misery in the material world, but if he could bring Radha and Krishna to a building in New York, nothing was impossible for the Supreme Lord. Even in the midst of Kali Yuga, a golden age could appear, and people could get relief. If Americans could take to Krishna consciousness, the whole world would follow. Seeing through the eyes of the scripture, Srila Prabhupada pushed on through the blizzard and pursued the thin trail, the support of his Krishna consciousness mission. February the 4th, he wrote again to Tirtha Maharaj, who had agreed to try for the government sanction if he first received written confirmation from a responsible donor pledging the funds for a temple. Prabhupada informed him that the donor would be Sir Pedampat Singhania, and he enclosed Mr. Singhania's favourable letter of the 14th. Prabhupada reminded his godbrother, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta wanted such temples in foreign cities like New York, London, Tokyo, etc. And I had personal talks with him when I first met him in Altadanga in 1922. Now here is a chance for me to carry out his transcendental order. I am just seeking your favour and mercy in making this attempt successful. Does anyone else want to read?
February 5th. Discouragement came to the plans Srila Prabhupada had formed around the promise of support by Kadampat Singhania. The Dvarka Vala wrote to express his dissatisfaction with the 72nd Street building I'm afraid that I cannot agree with your suggestion that you should buy a small house and erect something on top of it. Unfortunately, such kind of proposal will not suit me. The temple must be a small one, but it must be constructed properly. I quite agree that you cannot spend a lot of money at present, but within the amount the government may sanction, you should build something according to the architecture of Indian temples. Then only will we be able to create some impression on the American people. This is all I can write to you in this connection. I am very grateful for your taking the trouble of writing me. Prabhupada did not take this letter as final. He maintained hope that Padampat Singhania would still give money for the temple, if only the transfer of money could be arranged. He continued writing his godbrothers and other devotees, asking them to try to secure the government's sanction. He maintained the same aspirations, even though his sole prospective donor had rejected his scheme of a chakra and dome atop a conventional two-story building. February 15. He moved from room 501 downstairs 2 floors to a room all of his own. I have changed my room to room 307 in the same building as above mentioned for better air and light. It is on the roadside junction of 2 roads, the Columbus Avenue and 72nd Street. According to Dr. Mishra, Prabhupada moved in order to have his own place, independent of the Mishra Yoga Society. February 16. Prabhupada wrote to the proprietors of the Universal Book House of Bombay, giving some hints for selling his Srimad Bhagavatam in the Bombay area. He explained that he was trying to establish a Radha Krishna temple and that a big industrialist of India had promised to pay for the cost. Since it seemed that he might stay in the United States for many more days, he wanted the book house to take increased charge of selling his books throughout India. They were his agent for selling his books in Maharashtra, but now he recommended they take the responsibility in all provinces and introduce his books in colleges and universities throughout India. He also requested that they credit his bank account there for the books sold so far. February 26th. Mr. A.P. Darwadkar of the Universal Book House replied, I cannot give you very happy news on the progress of the sale of Srimad Bhagavatam because the subject is religious and only a small section of society may personally be interested in the books. We tried to push them through some booksellers to Nagpur, Ahmedabad, Pune, etc., but regret to inform you that after some time these booksellers return the books for want of response. As such, we are not only unenthusiastic to agree to your proposal of taking up sales for all India, but we were just thinking of requesting you to nominate some other people in our place to represent your sales program in Maharashtra. So far, they had only 6 sets of his books, for which they were about to transfer 172 rupees to his account. This was hardly encouraging to the author. Again, India was not interested. Even in the land of religion, religious subjects were only for a small section of society. Okay, so someone else want to read?
Okay. March 4. Another reverse. On February the 8th, Srila Prabhupada had written to India's new Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, requesting her to sanction the release of money from India. A reply dated February 25th, New Delhi, came from the Prime Minister's official secretary, Mr. L.K. Gar. Dear Swamiji, the Prime Minister has seen your letter of February 8th, 1966. She appreciates the spirit which prompted you to carry the spiritual message of Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to other countries. Owing to the critical foreign exchange situation which the country is facing, it is greatly regretted that it will not be possible to assist you from here in your plan to set up a Radha Krishna temple. But Prabhupada had other hopes. After writing to the Prime Minister, he had again written to Tirtha Maharaj, asking him to request Dr. Radhakrishnan to persuade the government to sanction the release of funds. He waited for 1 month, no answer. Apparently his godbrothers felt little obligation toward preaching in America. He had written that he needed encouragement from them to continue in America because it was so expensive. He had explained that he was spending the equivalent of 1,000 rupees a month. As such, I am counting every day to receive your favorable replies. But there was no reply. March 18. He wrote again to Sir Padambat Singhania, requesting him to send a man from India to supervise work on the temple in New York, as Mr. Singhania had previously suggested. There is no record of any reply to this request. Prabhupada wrote again to Sumati Murarji, requesting her to please send him a mridanga to accompany his chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. He also requested her that in the future, when he would send many men from India, she oblige by giving them free passage on Scindia steamship lines. No reply. As his financial situation became more urgent and his hopes more strained, his support from India withdrew in silence. His unanswered correspondence was itself a kind of message, loud and clear: we cannot help you. Although no one encouraged him, Srila Prabhupada trusted in the order of his spiritual master and the will of Krishna. The word from the Prime Minister regarding government sanction had been a definite no, but he had received another extension of his visa. Now his last hope was Sir Padampat Singhania. Prabhupada knew that he was so influential a man in India that if he wanted, he could send the money. He was Prabhupada's final hope. April 2nd. Mr. Singhania did not reply personally. Had his secretary, Mr. Iswara Iyer, write to Prabhupada, Iyer, thoroughly discouraging his last hopes for purchasing a building in New York. I regret to write that Sir Padambatji is not interested in the scheme of building a Radha Krishna temple in New York at present. In regard to the inquiry contained in the last paragraph of your letter, Sir Padambatji duly received your books of Srimad Bhagavatam from your Delhi office, yours faithfully. Seeing him from a distance, a tiny figure walking Manhattan streets and avenues among many other tiny figures, a foreigner whose visa had almost run out, we come upon only the external appearance of Srila Prabhupada. These days of struggle were real enough and very difficult, but his transcendental consciousness was always predominant. He was not living in Manhattan consciousness, but was absorbed in dependence upon Krishna. Just as when on the Jaladuta he had suffered his heart attacks, his reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita had supplied him the nectarine of life. He had already succeeded. Certainly he wanted to provide Radha and Krishna a temple in New York, but his success was that he was remembering Krishna even in New York City in the winter of 1965 to 66, whether the world recognized him or not. Not a day went by when he did not work on Krishna's book, Srimad Bhagavatam, and not a day went by when he did not offer food to Krishna and speak on Krishna's philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, "For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost to him and he is never lost to me." And Krishna assures his pure devotees that my devotee will never be vanquished. There was never any doubt about this for Prabhupada. The only question was whether Americans would take notice of the pure devotee in their midst. At this point, it seemed that no one was going to take him seriously.
Wow.
Hare Krishna. Thanks. I think it's probably a little bit earlier than we usually stop reading, but it seems like that's a good place to stop and reflect. So we might finish a bit earlier tonight, but it's a good time, I think, maybe to stop. Thanks, everyone. Every time someone read and their voice came in, and me and Emma just almost started giggling. It was so nice to hear everyone read.
It's really nice.
We were like, we just hear these voices come in, and it's like, so yeah, it's really nice hearing from everyone every week. It's really saturated in, you can feel the vibes, the mood everyone's reading. It's really sweet. So thank you. We were just saying, I'm sure everybody's got something to share, but for reasons that are probably too complicated to go into here, for us, it's unbelievable how poignant this was this particular week.
It's exactly what we needed to hear.
Just like, it's unbelievable how Prabhupada talks, like you feel it. And we just read in Chaitanya Charitamrita last night, was it? Some amazing things in Prabhupada's purports, but in one part he's talked about how the instruction of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life, and how crucial it is to act very faithfully and sincerely carry out and not deviate from the instruction of the spiritual master, and how he says you become useless.
Yeah, it says you're apara, you become useless if you deviate from your spiritual master.
So yeah, like when he says he's never alone,
yeah,
if, you know, we've heard it so many times before, but it felt really powerful hearing it for us at the moment. That actually, you know, you just have to, you just stick with what you know is true, because that's what, you know, Prabhupada says, or in his case, just in case anyone doesn't know, sometimes we're hearing Prabhupada talk about someone called Prabhupada.
Yeah.
So
his Prabhupada is his guru.
Yeah, so Prabhupada's guru was also called Srila Prabhupada as a kind of like honorary title. And then Prabhupada never actually called himself Prabhupada, but his disciples wanted to give him that title. And we'll hear that later on, the pastime will come later. And so Prabhupada said, because I was the only one that didn't deviate, I inherit my guru's title. So it said, it's not mine, I just inherit it from my guru. And if they want to call me that, okay. And on his letterheads, he never signed his letters as Prabhupada like that. So that may, just so in case people are wondering why, yeah, it may be a bit confusing, but yeah, that was just something that was really powerful for us, is that thing of really having to read Prabhupada's books very carefully in order to properly understand what his instructions are, and then to stick to that.
Because you can see that obviously now Prabhupada is, you know, seemingly, you know, there's some struggle and it's not looking successful, but he has no doubts that he is fixed in the service of his guru, and we'll see later on how everything unfolds, and that spiritual strength comes from that completely being fixed directly on the instruction of his guru without any, he's completely one-pointed. And it's been like the theme of our week, and then to read this is just felt like Krishna's arrangement.
Yeah, Prabhupada said, I'll just say one last thing.
Sorry, I know we're dragging on.
We're just like, wow, it's so far out, you know, it's like, oh my God. Prabhupada said, the only thing I'll take credit for is that I never budged an inch from what my guru said. People would glorify him, and Prabhupada said, no, my only credit, the only thing I can take credit for is I did not budge 1 inch from what my guru said. Everything else is just my guru's mercy. Like that. Anyway, sorry, Hare Krishna, thanks for listening to that.
We'd like to hear from everybody. All of your realizations.
We just offloaded there, we got a bit excited. I'll put us on mute now and someone else can talk.
I liked a bit at the end there when Adi Guru was reading about Prabhupada's success was in remembering Krishna. It wasn't like it was being recognized by the whole world, you know, because it's like that, you know, with me anyway. It's like, you know, I'm looking at a picture of Krishna or Lakshmi Devi or Radha Krishna or Prabhupada or Vedananda Swami or the Panjatattva, and I'm thinking how beautiful, how nice, and it really is like nice looking at the pictures. And I'm in a little small village in Scotland. The world doesn't like, you know, the world doesn't like experiencing what I'm experiencing. It's not really recognizing that, but at the same time, you know, I'm experiencing the pleasure of looking at pictures. So I suppose that's a success in it. I've got to kind of you know, take heart, you know, and take you know, well, that's success, you know what I mean? That's success in itself, even although the world doesn't recognize me. I don't expect it ever will either, but, you know, I suppose, you know, that's a success. So it was just very nice to hear that, and I could relate to that, you know. It was nice to listen to that. Thanks very much for reading, Adi Guru.
Thanks, Prabhu. Yeah, thanks, Adi. Thanks to everyone for reading. It was really nice. Thanks back to Vinod, Prabhu.
Yeah. Adi Guru just unmuted.
Oh, great.
I was going to say, Bhaktivinoda Prabhu reminded me. I had this few times where I leave Vrindavan and I have to go to Delhi or do something. And then there was one time, it's such a shock leaving Vrindavan, you know, and suddenly being amongst all these, you know, because in Vrindavan, everyone's a devotee and it's just like you're in this incredible, you know, the Dharma and everything. And you come out and it's just full of, the world's all horrible and full of, you know, even in India, imitating the West. So there's one time I went to this, I had my contact and she was going to this hospital in Delhi, this horrible hospital. We spent about 10 hours driving there and I had to stay in this room and it suddenly, anyway, all I had on me was one little tiny picture of Krishna. And that tiny picture of Krishna, that meant nothing to me because it wasn't even a nice picture that I liked very much, but I had it somehow. That became the most important thing in the whole world to me, that picture, you know, because it was just my only connection. And it just like, it was so important, that one picture of Krishna in this horrible non-devotee environment that I was in. So it just reminded me of that when Bhaktivinoda talked about looking at the pictures and how Prabhupada, you know, because later on he says, he says, you think I'm sitting in Los Angeles, but I'm in Vrindavan all the time. I'm in Vrindavan. Prabhupada never left Vrindavan. You know, he never leaves Vrindavan. He just seems to be in New York. Anyway, that's what I was thinking there.
Jai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daddy. Amazing. Thanks very much. I was also thinking, just while we wait, it'd be nice to hear what the kids think.
Yeah, what does Cheyenne?
Because we're not having them slacking off and hiding. They have to. I was thinking how nice it is that, of course, it looks. Radha Priya's made a comment. I was just quickly saying, you know, it looks like Prabhupada's, in one sense, he's kind of like having a hard time and whatever, and no one's helping him and things like that, and it's pretty rough. But it's like we kind of understand that Krishna arranges things like that. In a sense, it looks like the devotee's being hard done by, but actually it adds to their glorification. You know, that for Prabhupada feels like, oh, my surrender and my devotion's being deepened by this. That's how he feels. And for us, we kind of think, Prabhupada doesn't need that. Look how amazing he already is. And it just serves to make him even more incredible. For generations and thousands and millions of years, he'll be glorified because of those difficulties. So it's actually quite nice. But sorry, Radha Priya has written.
Radha Priya wrote in, I am forever inspired by the story of Srila Prabhupada speaking about there being hundreds of temples and books and there being only time separating, complete faith and vision.
Jai. Jai Prabhupada. Thanks, Radha Priya.
Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing story. I think that man, did he not go into a temple once? I don't know if it must be the same man. He went into a temple and for some reason, by chance or whatever, and he saw a picture of Prabhupada. Yeah. And he freaked out and was like, no, I know this guy. I know this man. And he went to he went to the devotees and was like, who's this person? They said, oh, he's our guru. And he was like, I used to hang out with him in the park and he had nothing. And he used to tell me that he had all these temples and he was just this, and I never knew, I don't know what he said, if he doubted him or he didn't know, or, you know, whatever. But he was like, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, and I'm now sitting in one of his temples and all his disciples are there and there's prasadam and everything. And yeah, it's a nice story that. Somehow he ended up in the temple. Great, yeah. I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
Or Mahamantra or Arvind or Minal.
Please don't deprive us of your realizations if you have them. Any comments, questions? Oh.
Prabhuji, just listening to the hardships you went through and how an amazing soul he was, just makes my hair stand up. I'm just lost for words. Just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just cry every time you see his picture in the altar of love.
Yeah, it's a labor of love, huh? It really is. But, you know, it's good to remember what he went through for us, I suppose. Yeah. Thanks, Jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Jai. Okay, so maybe is that it? We're
Yeah.
Hadi.
I've distributed. I'm buying these sets of Tikshu. They're very low cost, £29 for both volumes, like 15 quid each. And I've been sending them to a couple of new devotees and contacts. I've three sets I've sent. Amazing.
Right. Hadi Bol.
I mean, I'm not glorifying myself. I'm just saying that we should spread Lilamrta as much as Bhagavad Gita almost, you know. And everyone in ISKCON has to read Lilamrta. I mean, that's like, it's so important.
Yeah. Actually, one of the reasons we started doing this on Tuesday night, we both read it independently of each other. And obviously we're just totally blown away by it. But it was Tikshu actually told me quite a while ago now. He said, you and Hema should read it together, that book. As a married couple, you should both read Lilamrta every day or something like that. You should read it together. And finally, we kind of got around to it and we were like, okay, and we thought it'd be nice if we can do it all together, because it's very important for people that practice in bhakti to read this. Because Prabhupada's the Acharya, to understand how to practice bhakti in this age and these times, you have to hear about Prabhupada. It's compulsory to understand, you know. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Eddie.
In the third canto, Lord Kapila says that the glories of the devotees enhance the glories of the Lord. And in one purport saying, you know, like we chant Nrsingadev, Jai Nrsingadev, we always chant Jai Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada says in one purport there in the seventh canto that sometimes you get just as much benefit or more by chanting the name of the devotee as much as the Lord. Because Krishna likes his devotee to be glorified. Krishna's very, you know, he loves his devotees and he pleases him as much as having his own name chanted.
I mean, you can feel it reading it, right? Everyone that's reading it, because we do a Bhagavad Gita thing as well on Zoom, and it's like there's just as much nectar. You come away feeling just as good, you know, sort of thing, and having learned just as much and just as much to talk about.
I think this is my favourite Sangha of the week.
Yeah.
Out of all the things we do, I look forward to Tuesday nights the most.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. The book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. So there's no difference between the actual the book, the Bhagavatam, and hearing about Prabhupada. Yeah. So it's like, yeah. I think of it, and I don't speculate, but it's almost like, you know, you get the Puranas, right? You have the books that are so full of philosophy, and then you get the Puranas that sort of tell it in a story form for the sort of layman. And like, in a way, this is almost a bit like, you know, like you hear Prabhupada's life is almost like, well, you know, like that. He's living it. And so you hear all the drama and the intrigue and the emotion and the scenery and everything, and it draws you in, but you get all the life lessons, all the nectar and knowledge and philosophies there. It's like, it's amazing. You know, even I can relish that. It's easy to relish that. It's no problem. Yeah. Right.
It's very nice to hear you distributing those books, Hadi Guru. Really, really nice to hear that. It's yeah, beautiful book, and I mean, it's like, you know, they made a film about Jesus, didn't it? The greatest story ever told. it's like that, you know. It's
this is the greatest story ever told. No question.
It's a good selling line for that one.
No joke, these books are big, you know.
Yeah, I can see beautiful books. Yeah, it's nice to hear you distributing them, because I mean, right now it's a bit difficult to distribute books, isn't it? It's just like
I'm posting them.
Another, you know, just gotta give a few. You know, I'm just giving a few out in shops and things like that. Even when I go in a shop, if I buy something and the women's nice, like, you know, a small book or something, you know.
And like Margaret said, this is the easiest book for the non-devotees to read.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember I read that once when I was in a flat in London once. You know, I was reading Lilamrta, and it was I've got very happy memories of that because they weren't my best days. You know? They weren't it wasn't the height of my the height of my life, you know. But sitting reading Lilamrta in the evening, you know, even although I was in a pretty you know, degraded circumstance, it was still very nice, you know. It still touched my heart, you know. It's like these books can pierce through the darkness, can't they, and touch anyone's heart. And that's the nice thing about them. It's like touch anyone's heart, innit?
There's a condensed version of it called Your Ever Well Wisher.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Obviously,
yeah.
In a way, this is so much better because there's more of it. But we've distributed like hundreds of those books to students, and maybe even like getting on for 1,000 copies of those books at the university. The potency, like it's just the same. The ecstasy you feel distributing it is the same. And I'll let you showing us. Everyone, can you see? Yeah, he's got his packages. Wow, imagine unwrapping that for Christmas.
Yeah, that's the best Christmas present you could get someone, isn't it?
Yeah, far out.
Yeah, I used to distribute those the condensed versions, the black ones. I remember distributing those. Yeah, in places like Bradford and Wakefield and places like that. Yeah, Christmas time. Yeah. I remember first Christmas marathon. That was 1989. Yeah, I was distributing those in Wakefield and Huddersfield and York. Yeah, I remember distributing those books in those days. Yeah, really good.
Right. Haribo. 1989, back to Vinod's been a soldier for a long time.
Before I was born.
Veteran soldier. Yeah, I was just, I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah, that was my back to course, a month marathon on the book distribution.
In Bradford. Yeah.
So I won't be giving up Krishna consciousness after that being my back to course. It was it was so intense and so enjoyable, and like you know, it was like very successful actually financially. Book distribution wise, so I'm set for the rest of my life now. I'm set up. That's, you know, the foundation. The foundation I'm building on that now. You know, it's like yeah, my spiritual master at the time, my initiating spiritual master, he trained me up very well. He was very strict in a lot of ways, but you know, he trained me in a way that I won't be giving up Krishna consciousness. You know? There's nothing else to do, you know. It's
terrific.
Great.
Yeah. If you're going to train someone up, do it so that they don't stop. But I can't think of a better way to do it. Yeah, it's obviously worked because you're here. So yeah, thanks. Yeah. I just have one quick. So we'll have to wrap up, I think. Yeah. But just about what Adi said about it being better than the greatest story ever told. There's one video, I'll post it in the Facebook group. And I think, Adi, you're not on Facebook, so I'll WhatsApp it to you. Yeah, okay. You're muted, Adi. I can't hear you. Sorry, Prabhu.
Got my business Facebook found.
Okay, yeah.
Are we going to meet after on there? You're going to...
I can add you to it. I can add your business Facebook to the group, the Facebook group or something.
What about tomorrow night? We have to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll talk after this. Yeah, that's fine. Right. Yeah. But there's one video where... sorry, Adi, I forgot about that. Yeah, we'll talk later. Yeah. Adi's our guest for Wednesday night Sangha, so Adi's gonna join us and talk. Yeah.
It's not on Facebook, so please send
it. Yeah, we'll send it to you. So anyway, there was just a video. It's very short. It's like 2 minutes long, where an academic is giving. He's an academic that knew, I think, Prabhupada gave a review for one of Prabhupada's books in the early days. And so you'll recognize anyone that's read Prabhupada's books or distributed them will know his name from the inside front cover. I forget his name now. And he just gives a 2-minute introduction to who Prabhupada was to a group of academics at like Harvard School of Theology or something like that. And he just explains Prabhupada in relation to Jesus. It's a very short, simple video, but really ecstatic. So I'll share that with everyone. I'll find it and share it. It's really nice. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, yeah. Hare Krishna. Sorry to have to be the one. I hate having to be the one that breaks it up, but yeah, it's okay. We'll be back together tomorrow.
Yes, yeah. We'll see everybody tomorrow, hopefully, and then again next week.
Tomorrow's going to be intense. Kirtan from Hema and a class from Adi Guru. Hold on to your hats. It's going to be full on.
I didn't even know Adi was coming tomorrow. No, I'm pleasantly surprised.
This is how well I communicate in our marriage. It's perfect. It's brilliant. It works. Yeah. So, oh my God. Anyway, Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada. All glories to Prabhupada's sincere followers and all the devotees. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. We'll see everyone tomorrow, and I'll post that link now. It's great. Yeah. Jai. Haribol.
Haribol.